What is good history? Good history is based on sufficient evidence and on a representative sample of the primary documents on hand. To me, good history strives for accuracy and relevancy, along with being fair to people and events in the past. Context matters, uh, perspective matters. Good history seeks the most balanced interpretation rather than stretching the primary documents to their breaking point, distorting the primary documents, distorting the past with extreme or quote unquote radical for the time period tendentious theses. To me, good history asks questions. The strong historian is willing to modify or change their thesis and interpretations based on the primary documents rather than forcing the past into their current day or fashionable preconceived notions or ideas on what the past should be like. Strong historians should also be able to bench their own weight. A strong historical thesis, to me, is not overly emotional, not extreme or moralistic. The good historian understands that he is not morally superior to someone living in the past, just simply because he lives in the current day and they lived in the past. The good historian seeks to understand the past on its own terms, not the historian's own current cultural norms. Again, context matters to the good historian. Human beings who lived in previous generations are not to be condemned for not knowing the future. They understand the past on its own terms, in context, and the understanding of their world unburdened by our current notions of political correctness or social acceptability and or political agenda. Um, in other words, to me, the past is abused when it simply becomes a trial, where we condemn the past for being the past. How dare you're the past? How dare you don't have the early 21st century socially acceptable and politically correct attitudes, and so I think that's wrong. One example I like is Puritans. To modern day eyes, they were overly strict and oppressive on issues of sexuality and gender. To the good historian who seeks to understand Puritans in their world, understands that our modern day secular, permissive culture that tends to seek the overthrow of order and tradition is the lens through which we view our past. The current day fashionable thing is to, overthrow traditional Western civilization, overthrow traditional morals, ideas, thoughts, and so anything in the past kind of becomes to our current day idea, bad. Um, to our, to our society of permissiveness, where we've thrown out the rule book, they look oppressive from our point of view. A balanced view is they just simply had some rules that kept their society, from their point of view, from descending into what they would consider sin and chaos. And so that's my point. In their own context, they weren't oppressive. They had rules. We've thrown out the rule book. They had rules. They felt that those rules they had maintained their society. They would look at our society as overly permissive, sinful, and chaotic, with no social order. Right. The good historian understands that in some ways, the way we interpret the past says more about us and our culture than it does about the reality of the past. And you see that all the time. One of my colleagues talks about, Abigail Adams, wife of John Adams, second president of the United States, and her example is, you know, Abigail Adams spoke about women's issues. She encouraged thinking about women voting and, women participating in political life. This colleague, I guess, found a reference calling Abigail Adams this radical modern day feminist, and that was from the colleague's point of view, and mine too, is that would be incorrect to say that. If we went back in time and told Abigail Adams the definition of quote unquote modern day, quote unquote radical, depending on your point of view, feminism, she would reject the term. She'd be like, no, and so that's kind of the point, is letting the past be the past, understanding the past on its own terms. Abigail Adams, for her day, she argued for women's issues. She argued for greater political participation in society for women, and she thought that was fine. And so understand the context of her day, and not taking presentism. Like I'm opposed to presentism. You don't take presentist ideas and morals and then distort the past and turn it into what you want it to be, kind of a thing. And so to me, a good historian rejects that and seeks to understand the past on its own merits, its own, own context and understanding. The good historian seeks to understand rather than judge. The good historian seeks to understand rather than moralize and abuse the past, so current day fashionable people can feel good about themselves. And so to me, that's what a good historian is.